Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Reimagine v13. Very excited to be talking about all things Parachains, interoperability, and the Polkadot ecosystem as a whole. I'm your host, Roshan Mirajkar from the MouseBelt team, and today our panel will be discussing beyond the layers. We're going to be talking about Polkadot and all of the cool technology that comes along with it. Before we get started, I want to give a chance for our guests to introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to some questions. We can start with you, Bryan.
Hi, everyone. This is Bryan Chen from Acala network. So I'm the co-founder and CTO. We at Acala network is trying to build a decentralized finance network that powering the AUSD, the Acala dollar ecosystem, which provides a DeFi optimized environment for developers to build applications for financial use cases.
Glad to have you here. We'll move on to you next, Derek.
Yeah, hey, I'm Derek Yu. I'm the founder of the Moonbeam project. Moonbeam is also a parachain on the Polkadot network. What Moonbeam is a smart contract platform that's been optimized for cross-chain use cases.
Awesome. And lastly, Dan.
Thanks, Roshan. My name's Dan Brehmer. I'm with the ICE network. ICE will be an EVM-compatible extension chain to the Icon blockchain. It'll be Icon's application hub, and it'll seamlessly connect Icon's BTP interchain network to the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems. We'll be following the lead of Moonbeam and Acala, and launch a crowd loan campaign soon to secure a Kusama parachain slot. So keep an eye out for that announcement.
Yeah, no, love it. And excited to get started with this panel and talk about maybe how all of you work together in some way or some form. We'll start with you, Derek. If you kind of want to break down for our audience, what is the benefit of building on Polkadot's infrastructure? What are some advantages?
Yeah, I guess I would summarize the kind of question, why Polkadot? I see Polkadot as consisting of two core ideas or important ideas. So I explain it this way. The first idea is the idea of substrate and creating specialized chains. So the team behind Polkadot Parity have gone to great lengths and spent many years building this development framework called Substrate, and that allows you to create like your own blockchain, where you can kind of customize it exactly to your needs. And that's a huge kind of engineering marvel to have this ability to create your own blockchain. The second idea, the Polkadot idea, is to create an environment in which these specialized blockchains can communicate with each other. And so I think it's the combination of these two ideas. So you have this, on the one hand, this ability to create blockchains, and then on the other hand, this environment in which these blockchains can communicate with each other. Those are the two core ideas of Polkadot. And all of us here have used the Substrate framework to create chains, and then we're all going to be interacting with each other in this environment that's been created on Polkadot to facilitate communication between us.
I think that's a great explanation, and I want to get your thoughts as well, Bryan and Dan. Bryan, do you want to give kind of your thoughts on why you think Polkadot architecture is so advantageous?
Yeah, so I would like to emphasize what Derek says, that the Parity technology that built the substrate at Polkadot. And they are, I think, it's the only teams out there have built multiple blockchain projects previous. And so they obviously build the Parity Ethereum client. They also build a Bitcoin and Zcash clients. So they are the teams with that ton of experience, not building one, but multiple blockchains. And then building one blockchain is already hard enough. And building a framework that can build customized different kind of blockchain, that will be even harder. And then you need to set up a way to allow those things, they are not just isolated islands, but they are connected. They can communicate and work with each other. And then you need to come up with high level pictures of connecting all these pieces together. That's even harder. So Gavin and leading the parties, they do have this kind of technical capabilities and to set up this very solid foundations, and then creating this developer communities and creating this Parachain Polkadot developers, like all the Parachain teams working together towards to this visions that is truly able to scale and as well as delivering the real Web3 vision.
100%. And lastly, you, Dan, if you want to touch on, how does the ICE network interface with the Polkadot ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the key questions I think we're addressing here is scaling, because you have lots of blockchain projects that have been built, and they all face a scaling problem, essentially, that each blockchain itself is a state machine, which undergoes sequential transitions from one state to another as it processes transactions. So that's an inherent limit for any one blockchain. And there are a lot of initiatives trying to solve this problem. And Polkadot has taken a particular architecture that's very powerful, splitting up blockchains that are tightly connected by a relay chain that can pass messages between parachains in a secure manner, just like transactions on a single blockchain. Other methods of connecting blockchains tend to rely on trusted relays, which is one of the things that distinguishes BTP as well, that there's no reliance on a single or multiple trusted relays, but the communication between chains is secure and immutable, just like transactions on a single chain. So as Bryan said, this connecting of different blockchains allows chains to specialize, and then developers on ICE, for example, will be able to draw on resources built on other chains. For example, we're quite excited about being able to leverage the decentralized identity platform being built by Kilt, one of the other parachains.
Yeah, I agree. And I think on this topic, before we kind of continue down interoperability, I kind of want to touch on some of the use cases, or even talking about how much the technology advancement in the Polkadot ecosystem kind of drive the use cases and adoption. So I'll go to you first, Derek, if you maybe even want to talk about Moonbeam's unique approach to kind of being, helping the Ethereum community, but also bringing over some of those people into the Polkadot community. So how much do you think, technological advancement drives specific use cases?
Yeah, well, I mean, in our approach, I think, we're big believers in this architecture that we've just been talking about, in this ability to both specialize and to interoperate with other chains. And just to dwell on that topic for just a moment, I think that people have to understand that without like good interoperability, every chain is this kind of island onto itself, and you have to kind of, I liken it sometimes to this, like an economy from a long time ago, where you had a village and you had to do everything like locally, right? And then the opportunity that you have by introducing these interoperability features is that you can specialize in doing one thing really well, and then for things that you're not as good at, you get those from other chains. Like Dan was mentioning, maybe you can work with a specialized chain like Kilt to get like identity services, and that means you don't have to do that, right? You can focus on other things that you're going to be good at. So for Moonbeam, in that context, we had there's a few things that were priorities for us. We have this vision of being an interoperable smart contract chain, so smart contracts that are optimized for these cross-chain use cases. Part of that vision was that we worked quite a lot on like a full Ethereum style implementation, so that developers could use the Ethereum developer tools, Solidity, and a lot of the tools that a lot of existing developers are familiar with to create dApps and smart contracts. And I do see that at least so that's a specialization in a way, right? So our specialization is into that area. And I see part of the role that we can play in the Polkadot ecosystem is that we're bridging, in some sense, the familiar with this new and powerful but less familiar like environment. So people are already familiar with these Ethereum tools and how they work, things like MetaMask, and so in that sense, Moonbeam can act as a bit of an on-ramp, right? So maybe it's familiar, users can switch their MetaMask over, then they're on Moonbeam. But once they're on Moonbeam, then that's an opportunity to start learning about the rest of the Polkadot ecosystem and say, hey, like, okay, so Moonbeam's a parachain, and what are the other parachains that are on the chain? Maybe there's Acala. We already have these integration channels set up with Acala, so then there's opportunities to interact with Acala or get AUSD stablecoins from Acala. And so we see, that's kind of one role we can play, is kind of making this familiar environment that bridges people in, but then giving them these opportunities to learn and to interact with these other specialized chains that are on Polkadot.
100%. And can you talk a little bit more about, like, since you're working on the smart contract integration, do you think we'll see similar use cases on Polkadot for all the things people are using smart contracts on, like, for example, on Ethereum? or do you think we'll have different use cases? And kind of to narrow the question a little further down, there's a lot in each ecosystem. It seems like people are building applications only for that ecosystem. Seems like Polkadot, some of the applications, people are trying to help everyone.
Yeah, I mean, a few thoughts on that. There is definitely going to be some elements that are the same. So given that Moonbeam as an EVM, we do see some similar things like for example, DeFi protocols that are similar to what are deployed on other EVMs are coming in. But I think that the interesting thing for me is we're working on extending this base EVM feature set with cross-chain integrations that are powered by things like XCM, which is Polkadot's the Polkadot native cross-chain integration technology. And so I think that those are the interesting use cases to me, because those are things that are uniquely enabled by Moonbeam and by the Polkadot architecture. And so to give one example there, we have this Lido deployment just went live on Moonbeam recently. And in that deployment, there's a dApp that is living as a set of smart contracts on Moonbeam. But there's also this element, so they're creating a liquid stake derivative of DOT. So there's also this element that is kind of remotely exercising functions on the relay chain. So this chain is specialized for staking and security. And so it's the cool part is that you're in this Lido use case, you're combining functionality from two different specialized chains, but then it looks into the user, it's like they're interacting with just one application. And so that's an important element of that I think is the unlock in the future, is that you might have an ever increasing amount of specialized chains and other systems that are kind of behind the scenes, but to the user, they don't need to know about all the details of those things. They're interacting with a single application. That kind of mirrors to me a lot of the developments that have happened in Web 2, where you kind of can create this user experience that's powered by maybe a complicated set of infrastructure behind the scenes, but you're kind of creating an abstraction layer so that users don't have to know about like everything like related to that backend plumbing.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for touching on that. And now that you brought up XCM, I think I want to go into that a bit and maybe explain to the audience and people in general, like, is this a technology that's going to benefit just internal Polkadot kind of different parachains, or is it also going to benefit people from the outside? I'll go to you, Dan, if you kind of want to break down like, how exactly does the XCM technology benefit interoperability? And again, is it mostly internal right now, the value, or is it going to also be used by networks outside Polkadot?
Well, I think we as blockchain developers, building blockchains, we have users at two different levels, really. We have the end users that we care about, and we want to build things that eventually will serve their needs. But our first users are really the developers, and we have to provide a good development experience, good tools with which developers can create a great user experience and can, even more importantly, build successful businesses. So, to the extent that XCM allows developers access to more tools with which to build successful businesses, that's really the purpose of this. And XCM, I think, is unique compared to other, or XCMP, really, XCM being just, it's the format with which the messages are passed between parachains. XCMP allows a deeper communication between parachains than just your typical bridges that you see in other cases, that you can interact with the other chains at a lower level and control transactions on them at a lower level. So mainly, I just want to say that I think we're at the point where we're really focused on building tools for developers. And we have some mind to what end user experience can be built with those, but really we want to enable our developers.
100%. You got to make the developers happy first in order to bring everyone else into the ecosystem, for sure. And I'll jump to you, Bryan, if you want to talk a little bit specifically about, obviously we've seen different use cases for blockchains, different things like that. People are now trying ever, more than ever, to create all these different stable coins. How could something like a multi-chain stablecoin maybe solve some of these problems compared to like centralized stable coins? only on siloed to like one network usually?
Yeah, so as a stablecoin, as one of financial instruments, financial primitives, one thing is super important is about the risk. We want to, obviously, as a stablecoin, the price need to be stable, and then in order to make sure it's stable, is that the Acala is over-collateralized stablecoin. So for us, one of the very important criteria is that the risk of the underlying collaterals. And then obviously one of the easiest way to reduce the overall risk is by supporting different kind of assets. So not just say assets from Polkadot ecosystem, but also it could be including Bitcoins or Ethereum. Those are the high quality assets. So during any Black Swan events, hopefully those assets are not too correlated. So reduce the overall risk. And we are also working with, for example, Centrifuge to bring on the real world assets to make them available again through XCMP. And this also will be another very important steps to reduce the overall risk of the system.
And could you go into it a little more about, like, when you talk about real world assets coming over, so are you talking about synthetic assets, and do you think that more institutions will be willing to use something like Polkadot to bridge over real world assets compared to other networks that maybe it's been too expensive, or maybe they haven't been able to customize it as much as they wanted to?
Bringing real world assets to blockchain itself is a very complicated task. There are a lot of not only about on-chain protocols, but there are a lot of off-chain works are required. So we really need a specialized teams to doing all these complicated tasks. So Centrifuge, they are already have a lot of similar experience operating the protocols on Ethereum, supporting MakerDAO, and then they're going to bring in all those experience to the Polkadot and leveraging the benefits of substrate to building a specialized blockchains for the protocol instead of building a protocol on top of a generalized smart contract platforms. This will give them a lot more technical capabilities, as well as, and then we as a Parachains, a DeFi Parachain at Acala, we can just using XCM to access their assets through the Parachains. So we don't need to worry too much about all the underlying details, all the complicated legal stuff, compilation, regulation, etc. So the Centrifuge, they are able to help us to minimize all the work on this area, and then we can just use the assets without too much considerations.
100%. And let's kind of talk a little bit about the developer experience, or some benefits for developers. Everyone always talks about, shared security with the relay chain governance might give a chance for developers to actually focus more on building. Maybe if you want to start, Derek, and tell us a little bit about how you think about that, whether it's attracting new developers or kind of incentivizing developers to build on Polkadot.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned a couple points on this already, that I see two great sets of tools that developers have access to in the Polkadot ecosystem. One is Substrate, right? So Substrate is this kind of engineering marvel where it's very hard to create like one of these blockchain development frameworks. Really, there are just two in existence. Substrate is one. The Cosmos SDK is like the other one that's used to build Cosmos ecosystem chains. And so I think that you compare using one of these frameworks to what it would take to build a blockchain from scratch, and it's like a huge difference, right? I mean, you might reduce the engineering effort to create like a chain by some huge factor. It's like 10% of the effort it would take like if you didn't have a framework like this. And so that's a big unlock, right? So that's inhibited people from being able to create chains. And when you have a whole chain, there's like a much larger canvas to draw on than just what you have access to like on a smart contract platform, because you can control like the entire environment, right? You can control the whole blockchain, how storage happens, and all of these other things. So I do think that is a big unlock to provide this like larger canvas to developers. Now, at the same time, if you look at our project, I do think there is still quite a bit of value in some of the the existing technology stack, like the EVM technology stack that's used to create smart contracts. And really, the key reason there is that it's basically all of the developer tooling that's been created around the Ethereum network, this is like very hard to replicate as well, right? There's many years has gone into like all these developer tools, and it's not just the tools, it's like the infrastructure and service providers. It's like, folks like even you want to find auditors that like know how to like look at like code. So there's this mass of, this whole ecosystem of both technologies, companies, people that are around that tech stack. And so that's, when we looked at it from that perspective, we said, look, this is not going anywhere anytime soon. This is kind of, there's a lot of staying power in that. So, in our project, we're trying to kind of marry those two worlds together, right? So that you have this power of substrate, but you also have this power of this existing kind of Ethereum tech stack. And my longer term vision is that, we'd love to be able to almost allow people to do a hybrid where you might have some elements of your app that you're going to be implementing using the Ethereum tools, and then maybe some elements of the app you use substrate, right? You might like call out to substrate-based functions for certain parts of your app. And that's in line with this multi-chain vision I was describing before, where I think apps are going to kind of be inherently like living on many chains in the future, many specialized chains.
100%. And I've heard some people mention like on platforms like Ethereum, like the devs themselves are paying like high fees, and you want to keep your devs happy. So yeah, they're just talking about on the Polkadot ecosystem, obviously fees are lower. So maybe that's one thing that devs can take advantage of as well. They can test things more easily. I'll jump to you, Dan, next. If you just want to talk about your perspective of like, what's the right balance of incentives to attract developers?
Well, I think developers, they want to ultimately build things that will be successful. I mean, there are developers who are interested in the technology, and they're just experimenting, and lots of people out there like that. It's a very creative and innovative space right now. A lot of openness for people to build things, but ultimately, we're interested in supporting the developers that are going to build businesses, as I said before, and that's a challenge that in general developers, academics, are not that familiar with, so, and there's a big challenge between building a little project and bringing something to market, an actual commercial product. Right now, our whole blockchains have ecosystems numbered in the thousands or tens of thousands of community members. And, if we want to scale to, apps the size of Yelp or Uber or Airbnb, it takes a different level of business, so we're sort of thinking, at least I'm sort of thinking in that direction. We have to take it step by step from where we are, but to get to that level, you need user experience that is so much smoother than we have now. Right now, we're all technology people, and we're happy to, get into the details of, creating wallets on multiple chains and figuring out how the transactions work and so forth. But the mainstream consumer isn't going to tolerate that sort of stuff. They're going to want to just think about the value that they have, and they want to participate in this app, this game. Right now, it's mainly games and DeFi, but it's going to go beyond that to other things are naturally decentralized, like the the gig economy and so forth, Uber and Yelp and so forth. So I see, there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done to understand the business models that'll be successful in these new domains. There's been a little bit of experimentation in that direction. I know there are some projects, for example, trying to decentralize real estate. Huge amount of value there, huge amount of potential. No one's really cracked it yet. So I think we want to support the developers to exercise their creativity and innovation, be welcoming to new ideas like that. And that's one of the things that I like about the way we have both Kusama and Polkadot. You can try things a little bit more experimental on Kusama, and you're maybe forgiven if they don't work out perfectly. I love working in this creative and innovative space.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a great point. Like, I think everyone wants to see more real world business logic kind of move to blockchains, or in this case, parachains for sure. And yeah, I'll move to you, Bryan, and I'll shift the topic slightly, but maybe if you quickly want to cover, like, what are some of the incentives for developers, for example, to integrate something like a decentralized stablecoin, some advantages there, than working with some of these centralized stablecoins where they have to like do all the integrations one by one?
So as a decentralized stablecoin, obviously there are a lot of different characteristics compared to other kind of stablecoins, and or just, for example, compared to fiat payment solutions. There is just a lot of interesting new ways can be achieved. And then in terms of actual integrations, this kind of a key to unlock the access to the whole Acala dollar AUSD ecosystem. So once you integrate with AUSD, then you should be able to use it to access all the related DeFi products. And then there's just a lot of interesting possibilities out there. And then after that, and then you can see what can be done. Say, for example, deploy a bunch of smart contracts interacting with the Acala dollar, and you can do a lot of things, interesting stuff. And then you want to maybe see, hey, maybe I want to write a palace with all these additional features, and that cannot be done with just smart contracts. And then maybe you want to see, hey, maybe I can access to some other parachains through XCMP, which offers different, say, for example, cloud with identity solutions that could be integrated for KYC purpose, for example. Then you can, for example, make a smart contract only accept payments from KYC users. There is definitely a further use case out there. With those is combined together, then there is just a lot more possibilities. So we're still very early stage, but it's just more a matter of time for people to experiment, to explore, and try to find out all the interesting use cases that can be achieved with all these new additional capabilities offered by Substrate, as well as the whole Parachain setups.
Yeah, and like what I'm understanding from this talk is, yeah, the Substrate framework has really provided like a good foundation for developers to keep building things on top of that. And on that topic, I kind of want to go back to talking about just parachains and also talking about some governance aspects to that. So in your guys' view, do you think parachains are more suited for commercialization and scaling, or is it more about specialization of each one of these individual parachain? And I'll add one more thing, which I think people in the Polkadot ecosystem don't cover too much, but the concept of upgradability in these parachains. Like, what do you guys think maybe the future of that is? I'll start with you first, Derek.
I'll latch on to the second part of your question about upgradability. That is something that is like a really key capability and kind of feature of Substrate that, you're right, doesn't get talked about a lot. But it's something that we've used, and I think all of us here are using. And I'll give you this example, right? So for blockchains, I think the status quo is that they get upgraded not very frequently, right? So there's major projects out there that might do 2, maybe 3 upgrades a year. And I contrast that, I come from this Web 2 background and experience, having built a couple companies in the Web 2 space. And the status quo, what good looks like in the Web 2 space is that you're like for a cloud service, you're shipping every day, basically, right? So your shipping changes, the rate of change is like very, very high. And you build a lot of like automation, you're relying on that, right, to kind of adapt your product to react to like problems, to react to different changing market conditions. So there's like this big like dissonance, or kind of like, you get jarred when you come to the Web3 space, and you're like, oh, like there's like this, this very slow like pace of change, basically, like for blockchains. And so I think that Substrate does a really nice job of at least giving you like the capabilities to move a little bit into this like Web 2 direction, right? Where, because you have this like this kind of built-in upgradability, that allows you to, as a team, to iterate like much faster. And so I think I don't know what the number is, but we've had a lot of releases. So even since we launched our Moon River network and Moonbeam network, there's been many updates. And it's this kind of upgradability that's allowed us to, upgrade, very quickly, very rapidly, and then react to, different like changing market conditions. It could be a technical issue that's discovered. It could be a new feature that needs to be shipped. These XCM features just came in. So I think in the long run, that's going to lead to, competitive advantage for anyone using this framework. This upgradability that's built in.
I think that's well said, and yeah, I'm glad you kind of elaborated on that. I'll move to you next, Dan. If you maybe want to, you can answer you can answer either one of the questions. You kind of want to talk about just your view on, do you think parachains now are more suited toward specialization or commercialization, and will it stay that way? Will it stay the same when you're looking into the future?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you mean when you say commercialization. I mean, they certainly are suited toward specialization, and due to the tight integration, tight communication you can have thanks to XCMP, it will enable parachains to rely on resources from other parachains, and then I think it comes down to how effective are the resources going to be for developers to build businesses, and then that leads to a easier commercialization if you can build better businesses. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, and maybe if you want to outline, like, I think the discussions I've seen is like, are there clear incentives to for parachains to collaborate, or is there or is the opposite true? Like, is there an incentive to kind of be the leading or best parachain, if you kind of want to answer it in that lens?
Yeah, I think we all sort of realize that this, the market and the eventual endpoint or the direction that blockchain in general is growing is so large that we don't have to really compete. That we're much better off collaborating, and there's just going to be so much growth going forward that, and we do need to some extent specialize too and draw on services from each other. Just one thing I'd like to say, I guess, about the upgradability, I agree with Derek that it's one very attractive thing about building with Substrate and working on substrate-based chains that as a developer, you can rely on the fact that the chains will improve over time like that. They can become better iteratively. Icon actually has something similar which distinguishes it from other chains in that the smart contracts on Icon are upgradable. That's something that's been really helpful for us in developing on Icon.
100%. And I'll let you, Brian, kind of finish this question if you have any thoughts on either specifically talking about maybe like what would an upgradable stablecoin look like for the ecosystem, or even any other use cases that you might get with this upgradability aspect.
Yeah, well, the Acala dollar is already live for a few months already. And yeah, we are still constantly improving the protocols, because obviously it's almost impossible to get a version 100% right and sits there. It's just not possible. So we're taking from all this, the lessons we learned, all the market data we gathered from the actual mainnet with the real data, with all these things, and then we are able to come up with the improvements. Maybe we can do the things better. Maybe we need to add new mechanisms to improve this process. So this is we're constantly learning from those feedbacks from the products we already built, and then building improvements to our protocols, and then we're able to shipping those improvements out there. And then again, repeating this process, just constantly improving our products. So there's a lot of things we're still in our planning list on improving like usabilities, improving like different kind of assets we can support, improving the liquidation process with like smart contract integrations, with potentially multi-chain, cross-chain liquidations integration, this sort of thing. So there are a lot of things. If we want to release after we finish everything, there will be, I don't know, after 5 years. They just, of course, that's just not going to be a good idea. So we are able to ship the product, the working product now, and then just build releasing features. It's just like any traditional Web2 projects. No one is releasing the products after it's completely finished. Everyone is making new release. That's just how normal software development works.
Yeah, 100%. Great to see that mirrored kind of in the blockchain world. And I think this is a good sign for governments too, as they're releasing new regulations. We definitely need things that can kind of keep up with that. I'll move to my last question, and then after everyone answers, we'll get your final pieces of advice for builders. But yeah, so my last question is about mass adoption, and I just want each of you to kind of give your thoughts on things that could be improved in the ecosystem. Do you think it's the UI UX? Do you wish there was more resources for, like, I don't know, like an educational parachain or something like that? Just spitballing some ideas here, but yeah, I'll move to you, Derek. Like, what do you think needs to be improved? What would you like to see?
Yeah, for mass adoption, I mean, I think Dan, made some points in this direction earlier in the talk here. But I mean, for me, it really is about the UX. I would say is probably the critical factor for mass adoption. And again, I kind of come at this, having spent most of my career in like building, Web2 products, especially in the cloud like area. And so when I think about, I kind of blow like people's minds in the blockchain space when I describe, so what does a product will look like for this building an end user oriented like cloud product. And I think I had in the team, there was basically a third of the product team were like designers, people doing like UX research, people doing, it was like a good chunk of the team, and a big part of the investment was going into like this area. And if I look at most Web3 projects, there's just not like the same priority put on UX. You might have like one designer, you might have a freelance designer, you might have one, but they're not like a first-class person like at the table with like the rest of the people. So I do think it is this kind of priorities and kind of making UX like as important as like the engineering and the coding. That's like a mindset shift that has to happen, and that's when you look at mature Web2 products, that they have that kind of mindset, because they realize that you can have the best tech in the world, but if there's just barriers to using it, it just sits there unused basically. So I mean, that's my belief, is that there's still a big like amount of investment needed, like that needs to go into this like front end like UX usability, making it easier for folks to use these products without needing to have a lot of knowledge, right, or a lot of like these like pretty complex conceptual frameworks. Like that's going to be the biggest bang for the buck on getting more users.
Totally. The technology or frameworks are only as good as the amount of people that can use it, for sure. I'll move to you next, Brian. Give us your thoughts here.
Yeah, I'll just UX definitely something we need improvement. I'll just add on top there. Previously, say we were on Ethereum products, there are a lot of limitations enforced by Ethereum itself due to technical limitations, security considerations. There's a lot of limits on what can be done. So there is a lot of things you can improve on top of that otherwise you need to do a lot of nasty workaround. Say, for example, meta transitions to allow people to interact with protocol for free. But with Substrate, we kind of left all these limitations. Now it's actually possible, feasible, and economics reasonable, to support, say, free transitions for the users. And then we can see that what can we do with when we don't have those limitations, and then building something truly remarkable with the real reasonable actually user experience to normal users, so they don't need to figure out maybe I need to get some coins first and then I can enter the protocols. Yeah, so that's one thing. And then the next thing is that we're still very early. Substrate and it's built for I guess 3 or 4 years or maybe 5 years, but still it is still early. And then like all the Parachains they've just launched for like a year or so. We are still a very early stage. There's a lot of like developers, tools, and a lot of stuff still constantly are iterating the improvements. And there's something like I literally just like wrote some posts like last week talking about how we can improve Substrate itself, like to improve the collaborations between all the Parachain teams on improving the product on the Substrate itself. So there's still a lot of efforts, collaborations, efforts required from everyone in this ecosystem trying to improve the fund. We already have a very solid fundamentals, but still, you can always improve it, and this can also significantly in the future makes even easier to build a new project.
100%, and yeah, I'd love to see more collaborations within the Polkadot ecosystem. And lastly, Dan, yeah, give us your perspective here.
Yeah, as Derek said, one of the big things is UX, and to some extent, UX and good UX design is something that's fairly well understood. It's a little bit of a challenge given the limitations of blockchain technology. We have a couple of good examples on Icon. We built Balanced.network and Ohm.finance are two DeFi products that I think we produced with quite good user experience. But the other thing that I think is more at the experimental stage, a lot of innovation going on, and there will be for some time, is better business models. Right now, it's sort of been well established that blockchain can do pretty well with games and DeFi, but the power that we have with blockchain, the technology, is a new way to think about ownership and transfer of value. And these things really enable entirely new ways to build businesses. And it's wide open what we're going to be able to do with that. So I think that's where we're going to see the most innovation going forward. I'm excited about various projects that are growing recently to deliver resources for building DAOs, for example. That's one of my big interests is building DAOs, and that's why we want to focus on supporting developers to innovate in this space of new business models.
Yeah, hopefully the people watching this, if you guys have any ideas or want to build, there's a lot of interesting things to build. And yeah, lastly, to end things off, I just want you all to go around, give us your less than 30 seconds best pieces of advice for new developers or people building in the Polkadot ecosystem. I'll go to you first, Bryan.
Yeah. So I think one important thing is when people come to a new ecosystem, they usually use previous similar ecosystem, like Ethereum as examples, or can be built. But I would like to advise that you need to know it's definitely possible to replicate all these things on Ethereum, but Substrate Polkadot is a lot more than that. So there's a lot more new capabilities, new features that you can leverage on. So try to think outside and that, see what kind of those new features can improve on existing products, or maybe you can build a new products around those new capabilities to explore what can be possible with what previously is impossible, but now is possible. I think that's a lot more exciting than just replicating similar ideas and just making fine-tuning improvements.
Well said. You can go next, Derek.
Sure, I'd say that it's just an exciting moment right now where these technologies we've been talking about are just now shipped and are at a state where they're they're reasonable to use, in terms of bugs and other things, the things are in a good place right now, but it's still early enough that it's wide open. And I would say that it's the architecture of Polkadot that is the special thing here, right? Where you have folks like Bryan, Dan, and myself that are all have these parachain projects, and it is quite collaborative, I'd say. So if you have an idea for a project, you use Substrate to build it, you're going to attach to Polkadot as a parachain. I think you'll find that there's a lot of interesting collaboration opportunities with the other folks that are also connected to the relay chain. And so I think that's something that's pretty unique about Polkadot, is that it's almost like the architecture of the system itself leads to collaboration because of this shared model and this ability to interact with other chains. And so yeah, I think that's just a great opportunity. And I think we try to be as collaborative as possible. And I found the other teams as well on Polkadot have been quite collaborative when it comes to establishing these XCM channels, working collaboratively on cross cutting use cases, whether that be token transfer or other kinds of functional use cases. And so I think it's like it's pretty unique right now in like the entire Web3 broader ecosystem to have this kind of broad canvas to draw on, and this environment like that's like set up for collaboration like this.
Well said, well said. And lastly, Dan, you can take us out on your parting advice.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, Icon has been developing this blockchain transmission protocol for quite some time, and it's really the central unique value proposition for Icon. Icon has all along planned to be a hub in a different manner than Polkadot, but ICE is bringing together these two inter-blockchain communication communities or networks, and I think maybe even today, I think there's a light paper being released giving the specs for BTP, and we have a plan on ICE to make a seamless connection between BTP and XCMP. So people connected in the blockchain transmission protocol Icon network can seamlessly access Parachains through XCMP, and we're planning to introduce that connection a step at a time, but just excited about the connections to the broader blockchain community. Actually, one other thing too, the first demonstration of Icon Bridge, which is the initial step for BTP, went live today with minting of NFTs on Harmony from Icon. We're happy that has worked out well. So first step of BTP, yeah, we're excited to be part of Polkadot and making the connection there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it was very exciting talking to you all. I think our audience learned a lot. I learned a lot. And yeah, I think all of you really make it seem like a very exciting future. So thank you for your time. And for all of our audience that are still watching, we're bringing you more interviews here at Reimagine V13. And again, I'm your host, Roshan Mirajkar. Hope you all enjoy the show.